I want you to think about the last time you walked into a room full of people you did not know well. Maybe it was a party or a work function, a community event, whatever. And without really deciding to, you started to read the room. Who looked approachable? Who looked important? Who looked like they might have something to offer you? And who would you probably not bother with? Most of us do this, and most of us do not notice that we're doing it. So here's the question James wants to put to us. Not what do you say you believe, but what do those instincts, those split-second decisions reveal about what you actually trust? And that's the question we're going to sit with today. You see, there's a difference between what we would say we believe if someone asked us, and what our behavior reveals when no one is asking us. Most of us, if pressed, would say that every person has dignity, that God does not play favorites, that status and wealth do not determine a person's worth. We mean it when we say it, but then we walk into a room and something else comes out. So James is not interested in what we would say. He's interested in the second thing, the instinct, the habit, the pattern of attention and warmth and regard that we distribute to people before we've had a chance to think about it. Because that pattern, he argues, tells us something true about what we are actually trusting. We're all somewhere in this, and I'm somewhere in this, so let's grapple with it together. You see, James has been building toward this since the opening of his letter. In chapter 1, he pauses on the subject of wealth and poverty, and he makes a move that's easy to read past. And he says this in James chapter 1, verse 9 to 11. Let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation, and the rich in his humiliation, because like a flower of the grass he will pass away. For the sun rises with its scorching heat and withers the grass. Its flower falls and its beauty perishes. So also will the rich man fade away in the midst of his pursuits. James is describing two postures. The person of low standing is told to boast, to hold their head up, because their standing before God is not what the world sees. And the rich person is told to boast in their humiliation. Not because poverty is a virtue in itself, but because the things that it represents, like security, status, permanence, fade like a field flower in summer heat. The image comes from Isaiah, and it's not decorative, it's a forecast. James is telling his readers that God's accounting runs in a different direction to the world's. What looks like advantage may not be, and what looks like disadvantage may be something else entirely. So before we even get to chapter 2, James has already planted a question in the ground. What are you actually trusting? What do you actually believe has lasting weight? And then comes chapter 2. And James gives us a scene. My brothers, show no partiality as you hold the faith in our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory. For if a man wearing a gold ring and fine clothing comes into your assembly, and a poor man in shabby clothing also comes in, and if you pay attention to the one who wears the fine clothing and say, you sit here in a good place, while you say to the poor man, you stand over there, or sit down at my feet, have you not then made distinctions among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? That's James chapter 2, verse 1 to 4. So two people walk in. One has a gold ring and fine clothes. One has shabby clothes. The community responds instantly. The wealthy man is ushered to the good seat. The poor man is told to stand or to sit on the floor. Now, James could have framed this as a temporary lapse in hospitality, but he doesn't. He frames it as a contradiction. Look at how he opens verse 1. Do not hold the faith in our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory, with partiality. One New Testament scholar, Scott McKnight, puts it this way. The person in this scene is doing two things simultaneously, holding faith and partiality in the same hand. And James, he says, considers that a form of double-mindedness. Two things that cannot occupy the same hand are being held there anyway. James is not just saying, be nicer to the poor man. He's saying what you just did in that room is a contradiction of what you say you believe. Those two things cannot both be true of you at the same time. The word glory matters here as well. Jesus is the Lord of glory, and his glory came through poverty, through humiliation, through death, and only then through exaltation. The community that claims faith in that story and then instinctively ushers the wealthy man to the seat of honor is enacting a different story, a different picture of what actually has weight in this world. So their behavior is a confession. It just confesses something other than what they say they believe. And then James makes it still more pointed. In verse 5, he asks, "Has not God chosen those who are poor in the world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom?" God has chosen these people, and you've dishonored them. The very people God is for, you are moving to the floor. So let's ask the question plainly, because James is asking it plainly. What does the way we treat people tell us about what we actually believe? If we believe that God has chosen the poor, that glory came through humiliation, that what a person holds before God is not the same as what they hold before the world, then that working picture of reality should show up somewhere in how we respond to the people in front of us, in who we notice, in who we move toward, in who gets our warmth and our time and our regard. And if it's not showing up there, then what we say we believe and what we actually trust are two different things. And this is not a small problem for James. It is not a manners issue or a diversity issue. It is a question of integrity, of whether the inner and the outer are moving in the same direction. It is the same thing he diagnosed in the double-minded person of chapter 1. The one who asks God for wisdom, but does not really trust the answer. It is the same thing he will name later in the person who hears the word and does not do it. Always the same gap, always the same divided heart. And James wants to know where our trust is actually placed, not where we say it is, but where it actually is. So before we get to the application, James gives us one more piece in verses 8 to 13. He quotes Leviticus 19, verse 18. Love your neighbor as yourself. He calls it the royal law. Not one rule among many. In the tradition James is drawing on, this was understood as the summary of the whole second table of the law. To show partiality is not to break one small rule. It is to break the shape of the whole thing. And yet, he closes the section not on judgment, but on this. Mercy triumphs over judgment. James 2:13. And that is both a warning and an invitation. The same God who holds the accounting is a God of mercy, and we're called to be people of mercy. And that can look different for each of us. For some, it is the automatic attention that flows toward impressive people. The way certain voices carry more weight in a conversation. The way some people get followed up with and others get left. We're not being cruel. We're just distributing our regard according to a set of instincts that have never been examined. And James is asking us to examine them. For others, the issue is closer to what wealth has become in our inner lives. Not just whether we have money, but what role it plays in making us feel secure, significant, or settled. James is not condemning wealth as such. Abraham was wealthy, Job was wealthy. James holds them up as heroes, but he is intensely alert to what wealth does to our sight. When our sense of security is quietly anchored in what we have, it changes how we see people. Those who have more start to look like they matter more, and those who have less just start to disappear. And for others still, the gap is between compassion that stays in the feeling and mercy that actually moves. James will name this directly later in the chapter. If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and you say, "Go in peace, be warmed and filled," without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? The warmth is real, the intention is real, but nothing moves. And James says that is not the love he is describing. So let me ask you something direct. Is there a person in your life, someone you know or encounter regularly, who receives less of your attention, your warmth, your regard because of where they sit in the social picture? Not because you dislike them, just because, if you're honest, you do not give them the same quality of presence you give to others. I wonder, what does that tell you about you're actually trusting? And then the other side of the question. Because James does not close on judgment. He closes on mercy triumphing over judgment. The same God who has chosen the poor, who sees the flower fading while we are still impressed by the gold ring, is a God of mercy. And we're called to be people of mercy. So let's not leave this in the abstract. Think of that person, the one who comes to mind when you sit with that question. Go toward them. Give them the quality of attention you give to people you find impressive, not as an exercise, but as an act of trust, as a way of saying with your behavior rather than your words that you believe what you say you believe. James is not asking for a performance. He's asking for integrity. For the inside and the outside to begin moving toward each other. For what we trust and how we live to start telling the same story. I hope and pray that as something in this that we're all willing to grapple with. And I hope we'll keep going together in the next session. See you then.